Most people expected this Game of Thrones game to be a disaster, especially because it's free to play. But after seeing the combat, the world, and the atmosphere, I honestly think people judge this game way too quickly. Massive battles, dark fantasy landscapes, giant creatures, and a world that actually feels like Westeros. And honestly, this might end up surprising a lot of people. Yo, what's up, guys? This is Kai. And today we're taking a look at Game of Thrones King's Road, a free to play RPG that suddenly started getting attention on Steam again. Now, when most people hear the words free Game of Thrones game, they immediately expect the worst. And honestly, I did too. But after looking deeper into the gameplay, the visuals, the combat, and the atmosphere, this game actually looks far better than I expected. So today, we're going through what makes this game interesting, what it gets right, what people are worried about, and whether it's actually worth playing. The very first thing this game gets right is the atmosphere. The dark medieval environments, snow covered landscapes, massive castles, and gritty villages immediately feel like something straight out of Game of Thrones. And honestly, that matters a lot because the world of Westeros has always been one of the franchise's biggest strengths. Everything feels cold, dangerous, and constantly on the edge of chaos. Even simple locations have this heavy sense of tension. And for a free to play game, some of the visuals genuinely look impressive, especially during larger cinematic moments. The lighting, the armor designs, and the environments all help sell the fantasy vibe surprisingly well. But visuals alone don't save a game. The real question is, how does it actually play? And honestly, the combat is probably the biggest surprise here. A lot of people expected clunky mobile game combat, but it actually looks fairly solid. You've got dodging, heavy attacks, special abilities, parries, and large enemy encounters that feel cinematic. Some fights genuinely look intense, especially when enemies start surrounding you. Now, obviously, this isn't some revolutionary combat system, and it's definitely not on the level of games like Elden Ring, but for a free Game of Thrones RPG, it honestly looks much better than expected. And the different combat styles help keep things interesting too, depending on how you want to play. You can focus on speed, heavy damage, or more defensive gameplay. But combat alone isn't enough for a fantasy RPG. The world itself has to feel immersive too. One thing that stands out almost immediately is the scale of the environments. The world feels massive. You've got frozen forests, ruined battlefields, dark villages, massive castles, and locations that genuinely feel connected to the Game of Thrones universe. And because this is Westeros, the world constantly feels dangerous. There's always this sense that something terrible could happen around the next corner. Now, obviously, this isn't a fully open world Rockstar level experience, but honestly, for a free to play fantasy RPG, the amount of detail here is surprisingly decent, especially if you're already a fan of the series. And of course, we need to talk about the thing everyone cares about most. Yes, there are dragons. And honestly, some of the larger cinematic moments actually look incredible. Huge battles, massive fantasy creatures, armies fighting in dark, snowy environments. This is where the game really starts feeling like Game of Thrones, because even when the gameplay isn't perfect, the atmosphere and scale still create some genuinely epic moments. And honestly, that's probably what's carrying a lot of the hype around this game right now. But there's still one major concern, and that's the free to play system. Because whenever a game launches as free to play, people immediately start worrying about microtransactions, pay to win mechanics, and endless grinding. And honestly, that concern is completely fair. A lot of games have ruined themselves trying to aggressively monetize players. Right now, it's still too early to fully judge how fair the progression system will be long term. But surprisingly, a lot of players seem more positive than expected. Most people went into this game expecting a complete disaster, and instead, the reaction has been more like, wait, this actually looks decent. So, after all the skepticism, is this game actually worth trying? Honestly, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, this game is probably worth downloading, especially because it's free. The atmosphere feels authentic, the world captures that dark fantasy vibe surprisingly well, and the combat actually looks fun at times. Is it perfect? Definitely not. But compared to what most people expected, this game honestly looks far more promising than it had any right to be. And considering how difficult Game of Thrones games have been in the past, that's honestly pretty surprising. And that was Game of Thrones King's Road. What do you guys think? Does this game actually look promising, or do you think it's going to fall apart later on? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more gaming content. This is Kai, and I'll see you in the next one.